Head to your local hardware store and buy a sheet of OSB. First, cut the OSB into 15-inch squares. You will need 3 of these squares. Apply wood glue to the edge of one of the squares and place it vertically on the edge of another, creating a 90-degree angle. Screw in 2-inch corner brackets to secure the L shape. Don't use the screws that come with the brackets as they will be too long. Instead, use some 1/2-inch screws. Set aside those original screws though, and you will use them later. Screw in 2 more brackets and you will now have a U shape. Place a 14-inch 2x4 between the 2 side pieces to act as a temporary brace. Cut a piece of fabric that is at least 50 by 20 inches. Remove the temporary brace and line the inside of the U shape with the fabric with about 2 inches hanging over the edges. Take a staple gun and staple the fabric onto the outside of the U-shaped wood. I used a pneumatic stapler, but you can also use a regular hand staple gun. Fold the side edges in and staple around the outside of the U-shape. Again, it is very important that you are pulling the fabric taut before each staple. Now, take that 2x4 piece and wrap it in a piece of fabric. Use your stapler to wrap and secure the fabric. It's just like wrapping a package. Press the wrapped 2x4 back into the center of the U-shape. Take some of those original screws that came with the brackets and screw the 2x4 in place from the outside of the box. Now take a large piece of fabric, find the center of one edge, and staple it wrong side up to the center of the box. Now place a pool noodle from the dollar store and center it on the box, tucking it in against the stapled fabric. Wrap the fabric over the noodle, pulling the fabric taut and securing it with the staple in the center. Continue to staple around the pool noodle, tucking it into the fabric as you go. Continue with the same process with 5 more pool noodles until the wood box is covered. This can take some time. In fact, you may feel like you are in a wrestling match with the pool noodles. Stick with it. You might occasionally need to tuck and fold some fabric before stapling in order to get a smooth finish on top of the noodles. I actually ran out of fabric and needed to piece another piece of fabric in between 2 pool noodles before continuing. This was pretty easy to do. Pull the loose fabric at the end of the wrapped pool noodles over the edge of the bottom wood and staple along the inside edge so you have a clean finish. Cut away any excess fabric. I hope this inspired you to take some wood, some fabric, and some pool noodles and create your own comfy and stylish ottoman. Ever stub your toe in the dark or fumble for a glass of water? Then you need Snap Power Guidelights, the innovative outlet covers that light your way without the hassle. These sleek covers replace your existing outlet covers, adding a gentle glow exactly where you need it. Snap Power Guidelights 2 Plus are a breeze to install. No electricians, wires, or batteries needed. Simply snap the outlet cover into place by lining up the prongs and secure with a screw. Finished in seconds. Plus, they're incredibly energy efficient, costing less than $1 a year to run. The long-lasting LED lights shine for over 25 years, so ditch those bulky night lights for good. Unlike night lights, Snap Power Guide Lights save precious outlet space and cast a warm glow, illuminating your beautiful counter space. Click this link in the description to get 10% off your Snap Power Guide Lights. Thanks to Snap Power for sponsoring this video. Light up your nights simply and safely with Snap Power Guide Lights.
I wanted to create some small weather-resistant seating for this space that I have outside of this waterfront condo I've been working on. So I ran down to the dollar store and picked up some pool noodles. When I got these home, I cut them in half lengthwise. I made sure to cut the pool noodles to the length of the bench seat. I realized it would be best if I took the very first piece and wrapped it around the front part of the wood bench seat, and I secured it in place using a staple gun. At this point, I also added some fabric. I chose outdoor fabric because I knew that my bench was going outdoors. I secured this in place as closely as I could to the bottom of the pool noodle. After this, I moved the fabric out of the way again, put my next noodle piece down, secured it with the staple gun, put the fabric over that piece, and secured that piece again. And I continued this pattern of noodle fabric so that I could create tufted channels, and the fabric would look like it goes all the way down in between the different pool noodle pieces. When I got to the end of the bench, I again took that last piece of pool noodle, wrapped it around the back edge of the wood, and secured it in place. The next step was just pulling the fabric over to that edge and securing it in place again. Now I did have still the two sides of my bench, so I kind of played with the folding in this area until it became something that I liked, and I secured it on the back of the bench again. That's all it took to get the bench seat ready. Now I needed to add the legs. I had ordered these legs off of Amazon. All I had to do was secure them in place using the screws that came in the box. Once the legs were attached, I went ahead and took my new bench and set it up in my little outdoor area. I love that it gives a little bit of seating, doesn't take too much space, and it won't get ruined by the elements because everything is water resistant.
I'm going to be making a headboard for my son's twin size bed, and so I'm using a piece of scrap plywood, 48 inches long, 18 inches deep, and this is going to be mounted directly to the wall, so I don't need it to have a ton of height. The first thing we need to do is figure out how many of the pool noodles we will need to cover the length of the headboard. And so these particular noodles are 2 inches in diameter. And so when I trim these down the length, I'll have 2 inches wide and then a 48-inch long board. I'm gonna go right down the center and just cut them in half so that I have that flat edge to go flush against the board. So I worked in sections of about 3 to 4 noodles at a time, and you can see here I'm spraying the adhesive directly onto the board and placing the noodles right onto the back of it. I didn't put much spacing between the noodles, and you'll see why in a little bit, but I can tell you the thicker the fabric you're working with, you may need to leave a little bit of a gap between the noodles, but if you're working with a very thin fabric, putting them up right next to each other would probably be just fine. Once they're all in place, you should have something that looks a little bit like this, and it's time to attach your fabric. I took it outside and flipped the entire headboard structure over so that the noodles were facing down as well as the fabric. And so you can see here, I'm spraying a little bit of the spray adhesive onto one end and rolling the fabric over, pressing it down really firmly. This is the staple gun that I am using. You can see there it's loaded with staples and attached to an air compressor, but if you don't have something like this, a handheld stapler will do just fine. So initially I started to apply the fabric with a little bit of spray adhesive on the noodles, and quite honestly, it was a disaster. The noodles were pulling up. I really think that with the pleather being so thick, it needed some space in between the noodles to create those beautiful channels. So I went back to the drawing board, which is unfortunately part of DIY, and spaced the noodles out with a little bit of spacing in between, and then attached them also with the staple gun for some added stability. I worked in sections of about 4 at a time, sprayed a little bit of spray adhesive on, and then just kind of used my hands to firmly work the leather into the channels. And you can see there it's showing up a lot better, and you get those more defined creases with the spacing. Now that those channels were all nice and tucked in, it was time to finish the corners and the edges. This is my first time doing any sort of upholstery, especially with the thicker material like pleather, and so it was a little bit of learning curve. I trimmed the edge at the corner and then just tucked it over and secured it tightly with a little bit of spray adhesive and then also more of the staples. Once that corner was secure, I just worked my way down, and at each of the channel segments, I pulled the pleather really tightly and kind of turned it onto itself to make sure that those segments were each clearly defined, and then used, again, more spray adhesive and more staples. What I love about this project is that it's completely customizable to fit whatever color, shape, or size that you need for your space. And if you have a little bit of patience and a little bit of time, you can create a glamorous look on a budget. I hope you guys have enjoyed this project. Thanks for watching Home Talk. See you next time.